You're listening to 95.7 The Game. It's an Odyssey station. You can download Twitch and YouTube, something like that. All right. On the line right now is Odyssey NFL insider Ross Tucker. Insider calls are brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Mayo game day be delicious. Hey, Ross, this is what, and Ross comes courtesy of the River Islands guest line in Lathrop. Okay, Tucker's going to get on me for this butcher job.
Yeah, get him, Ross.
But anyway, here's the question. We're asking Niner fans, if you were asked by a buddy, what's going on with the Niners? How would Ross Tucker answer that? What's going on with the Niners, Ross? Why are they 5-5?
Well, that's a good question, and I would say a much better question than whatever the heck that intro was that you just did.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, Steiny, you have one job, and it's to, introduce the segment, to do the reads, introduce the guest, and you butchered it 3 or 4 different ways. If you were just teaching a class on how not to do it, that was wonderful. That was really well done.
Well, Ross, let me tell you, the boss once told me I'm not a real host.
You didn't even say hello, Ross.
Yeah. What's going on with the Niners?
Here's the answer. They're just not that good. And I'm really surprised. I really thought a couple weeks ago, once they got McCaffrey back, I thought that they would start to go on their run and that they would get back to being the Niners that they've been, and that he was more or less the missing piece. And, yeah, they've had other issues with injuries and whatever, and I know Kittle was out, and I get all that. But, they didn't really look that great against the Bucs, but some of that was Moody missing kicks, and they won the game or whatever. To lose at home to Seattle in the manner in which they did was very, very surprising. There's no question. Stunning.
Well, speaking of being stunned, something we were talking about before the show is, it's about the time of the year where you start to look around the NFL and figure out, okay, who's up, who's down, who's most impressive, who's a disappointment. If I asked you if the Niners are the most disappointing team in football, how would you answer that?
Yeah, no, they're not. I mean, they're disappointing, but there are teams that are much, much worse. I mean, how about the New York Jets, who had very high expectations coming into the year? You could say the Cleveland Browns. I mean, there are teams that came into the year thinking that they were playoff teams, and they've been totally out of it for weeks. That is where the Niners are in a surprisingly good place, right? Whereas a lot of these teams, the Jags or the Jets, even I would say the Bengals are out of it for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
When you look at their division and you look at the AFC. That's not the case with the Niners. I mean, as bad as it's been, there's still a lot of football to be left, 7 more games, and they're only a game behind the Cardinals. I don't know, have they played them once so far or twice? I can't remember.
Just
but
once.
It doesn't really matter. The point is if the Niners go, 5-2 in these last 7, there's and one of those is beating the Cardinals, there's a really, really good chance that they'll win the division and nobody will really care about anything that happened in the first 10 games.
Insider calls are brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. You can purchase Hellman's at your local Walmart, Kroger, or grocery store to add extra deliciousness and creamy flavor to your game day dishes this football season. What would you make of this stat if I threw it at you? Brock Purdy passed 28 times on Sunday, and he didn't throw one pass over 20 yards. What would that just tell you, even if you didn't see the game?
It would tell me 2 things. One is they missed Ayuk, and the other is that the Seahawks were playing a lot of 2 or 3 deep safety looks to prevent long plays down the field. That would be my guess,
right?
If I didn't watch the game.
Now, Ross, as far as reasons to feel hopeful outside of just that they're a game back, because I think and when we talked a couple weeks ago, is they're going to hit the ground running against Tampa. They have McCaffrey. They'll all of a sudden transform into a different team. Do you still feel like that is possible, or do you feel like this is going to be a season where the Niners are just kind of going to limp to the finish line, hopefully sneak in, and perhaps be a one and done? I guess, why should fans feel like something is going to change with this football team if you believe it can?
Because talent-wise and pedigree-wise, they're still as good as anybody in the NFC, and we saw it last year. Now, I know every year is a new year, and they have some different guys in there, and blah, blah, blah. But no joke, the exact conversation we're having right now was the same conversation I had with the Kansas City radio guys a year ago at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if the Chiefs were 5-5 or 6-4 or what their record was, but it was the same chat. It was the same conversation. Why aren't they playing well? Is this a lost year? What is there hope for the future? Blah, 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 blah. And they were in a bad division. They found a way to win the bad division. And then they went on the road and beat the Bills, which I didn't think they would do. On the road and beat the Ravens, which I didn't think they would do. And at that point, I thought it was kind of a toss-up whether or not they would beat the Niners in the Super Bowl, and they did. Now, do I think it's likely that the Niners go to the Super Bowl and win it? No, I don't. But that's the hope. I mean, that's the belief, is that the Niners can follow the 2023 Chiefs model.
Let me ask you this, Ross, and we're joined by Ross Tucker, Odyssey NFL Insider. I got to believe that most people at the start of the season, who's coming out of the NFC, would have said the 49ers. If I give you a shot, if I give you one team now that you would expect to come out of the NFC, would it be the 49ers? To make it to the Super Bowl, not to win it.
If I had to pick one?
Yeah.
No. I would pick the Lions right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, I'd probably pick the Eagles. But honestly, I might put the Niners third, which says a lot, right? I mean, there's a decent chance they don't make the playoffs. Even today, I have a betting podcast, and on my Even Money, it's called Even Money betting podcast, my co-host said we just posted to social media at Ross Tucker Pod. He doesn't think the Niners are making the playoffs. I think there's still a decent chance they do. And when they get there, I would have them as the third best team, third favorite to go to the Super Bowl. I put them behind the Lions and Eagles, but ahead of the NFC South champ, the Vikings, the Packers, Commanders. I'd still take the Niners over those other teams. The problem is, they're going to have to go play at Philly and at Detroit, maybe back-to-back weeks. Yeah. But that's what I said last year about the Chiefs, and then they did it.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, Ross, in trying to figure out just where the Niners are at, everyone, I think understandably when people start to run out of answers, they just point blame on the head coach. And Kyle Shanahan has been in the crosshairs for much of this season, but especially after the loss to Seattle. Are you surprised at just how far of a step back it appears that the offense has taken, understanding that they don't have Ayuk, they haven't had McCaffrey for most of the year, but even now with 2 weeks of Christian, and he's been on the field for close to, if not more than 90% of snaps, are you surprised that Kyle Shanahan hasn't been able to get more out of this offense?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. It makes you think that, he's struggling with all the moving parts, which I would say to you is probably somewhat understandable. It's not an excuse, right? But it could kind of be the reason, if that makes sense. That's kind of what I say to people sometimes about injuries is like, we all know injuries are no excuse and every team has injuries and whatever, but I see it. I mean, listen, the Eagles are 7-0 when they have A.J. Brown. They're 1-2 when they don't. It makes a big difference. You know what I mean? He makes a big difference when he's out there or not. And I feel like, McCaffrey's that guy. I think Kittle's, those guys make a big difference when they're out there or not. And how many games have they actually had? And obviously I know Ayuk's done, but McCaffrey comes back and then Kittle misses the next game. So it's just not ideal, not easy. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it. Everybody driving is like, right now listening is like, blah, 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 Ross. We don't care. That's fine. I don't care that you guys don't care. I'm just telling you some of the reason why the offense isn't as effective.
Ross, Trent Williams is someone who's considered one of the greatest, offensive linemen of all time. You played that position. Trent's obviously getting older. From a firsthand experience, when you started getting over the hill, and obviously it came earlier for you to be over the hill, but what are the kind of things that happen that make you less effective as an offensive lineman?
Wow, Steiny. Thank you, buddy.
I had to take a shot after the open.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, but you like everybody could hear you messing up. Like for me, it's like you're bringing up something from 20 years ago. No, you know what? It's funny that you say that. Here's the deal. After I had a back surgery, okay, I came back from that. I started 13 games, and I noticed I was just a tiny bit less explosive, a tiny bit less agile. And the thing I tell people all the time about the NFL that they don't really realize, a tiny bit is the difference. Like that. So let's put it this way. If I started both of those, my explosiveness and agility, if I was average at best for an NFL offensive lineman, after the back surgery, when I just lost a little bit, but I lost a little bit, then I'm below average.
Right.
Let's put it in running back terms. That's the difference between a running back getting through the hole for a big gain or getting tackled for 3 yards. That little tiny bit. It's the difference between being a starter and a backup, or a backup and out of the league. And for Trent, it would be the difference between him being the best and just being very good.
Yeah. What?
I think he's probably still the best, but he might not be quite what he has been, which it would honestly be weird if he was. It's unbelievable.
Right.
Well, Ross, it also feels like that might be the difference just with the 49ers. And I guess could a tiny bit of slippage from Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey might not be 100% yet. Brock Purdy might have regressed a little bit, now in his third season. Do you feel like that tiny bit that you're talking about could be the reason why the Niners have gone from being the 1 seed to a 500 football team?
Yeah, I don't know. When you watch them, I think it's like anything else. If everybody is like a little bit worse, then that adds up. So there is some truth to what you're saying. But I don't know. It just feels like I don't see it that way when I watch the games. It just feels like these have been close games, and these are games that they usually win. But this year, for whatever reason, they're not finding a way to make the one play that's the difference in the game. I don't see it visually. Kittle still had some really good games. I've seen Trent Williams have some incredible plays. I don't see that part of it. I guess maybe if I had to say anybody, I'd say probably Deebo. I haven't seen quite the same level of absolute ridiculousness that we're used to in terms of his explosiveness.
Ross, we always keep an eye on the NFC contenders. So if I were to ask you what's going on with the Eagles right now and where they are now compared with early in the season, why have they caught fire?
A couple things. One is they've been healthier. They've gotten Goddard back and A.J. Brown back and Lane Johnson back. So that's a big part of it. And then secondly, they haven't played the toughest schedule, if we're being honest, right? Their schedule has been a little bit easier. But the bye week, it feels like they finally kind of figured out these new coordinators during the bye week, and they inserted Cooper DeJean in at nickelback. he's been fantastic. Like, he is awesome. Absolutely awesome already. In fact, they nailed so many of their off-season moves. It's extremely impressive. Their first two picks, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, are both like absolute studs already. It's super impressive. And they went from having a bad defense that collapsed last year to now having a pretty darn good defense.
Well, and finally, kind of in regards to this weekend, the Niners are going up to Green Bay, a team that's 7-3. I guess because I haven't seen the Niners so far this year, Ross, beat a good team. Am I crazy to think that winning against a quality opponent just might be the thing to get the Niners mentally right to finally break through? Is that something that could turn around this season? A singular win against a team like Green Bay, who's been pretty damn good this season.
Could certainly help. Yeah, I mean, I think it could. I think it could certainly help. I don't think there's any question about it. The Eagles were 2-2. People were calling for them to fire their coach, and now they've won 6 in a row. You never really know when it's going to flip in any season, and I think you can absolutely flip at any time for the Niners. And I tend to still think it will, guys. I mean, I don't know when. But I would still pick the Niners to win that division, despite all of the evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, I think I'm there. I'm still there with you, Ross, on that one. Hey, thanks a lot, my man. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Sounds great. See you guys.